Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Post Up with David Grubb here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb. We're going to kick things off today. Look, I'm going to entertain these as exercises because I think if you've watched this show more than once, you know that I don't believe that the Pelicans are going to move Zion Williamson, at least not this year. I do think that Joe Dumars is going to give Zion every opportunity this year to prove that he can be a franchise player, that he's willing and ready to take on the mantle of being the franchise player with all that entails. I think Joe Dumars will also have a very short leash with Zion. He's not going to let this drag out for 2 to 3 years in trying to figure this out. He's going to do this in 1 year. But yet and still, around the league, there continues to be talks about what a possible trade to secure Zion Williamson could look like. And most of these deals are quite unattractive, I would say. They put the Pelicans in a position where they've got to do a lot of rebuilding. And I, of course, anytime you make a move and you get rid of a former number one pick, you are in a rebuild. And if that's what the Pelicans are looking for, certainly there will be options available to them. One of the latest is a suggested deal about Zion Williamson going back to North Carolina. Yes, he's a South Carolina native, but he played his college basketball that one season in Duke. And South Carolina is borders right, from Charlotte. You can get to North Carolina you get to South Carolina pretty quickly. So certainly there would be some interest in that market for someone like Zion Williamson and a team that has not had a true superstar. Though LaMelo Ball flashes star potential, he's not played enough games and he hasn't led the Hornets to anything significant. They've made the play-in, but they've never made the playoffs. So Zion would be them trying to capture a star still on the ascent as far as they're concerned at 25 years old, and trying to reclaim him and turn him into a true franchise player. But what would that deal look like? So let's look at that, of what a potential deal would look like as it's proposed and whether or not it makes sense for either side to go ahead and try to make that happen. So the proposed deal suggests the Pelicans would send Zion to Charlotte in return for Miles Bridges and rookie forward Tijan Saloon, along with two future first-round picks in 2026, that'd be next year, and in 2028, so 3 years down the road. For the Hornets, certainly, for them, it's again trying to reclaim Zion Williamson and turn him into a franchise player. And you would think that because of the relationship that Zion had with Lonzo Ball, and certainly they were effective together offensively, and Lonzo was a very solid defender and turned himself into a knockdown shooter, you would think that LaMelo, who is a gifted playmaker himself and a very good scorer, that those two in transition would be really exciting together. And absolutely, it would be for fans. There's a lot of star power. You get Melo and you have Zion. Those are two things that sell tickets. And then the offensive boost, certainly you get a more consistent score to go along with their core, including Brandon Miller. And then you saw a resurgent Mark Williams, who was supposed to be in that Los Angeles Lakers deal, but ended up coming back to the Hornets and playing very well for them down the stretch. That would give them a very interesting 4-man core to build around and hopefully turn that franchise into a winner. Of course, the concerns for the Hornets is they already have one injury-prone star in LaMelo Ball, and to add Zion Williamson to the mix is taking a huge risk. The financial commitment to Zion, when that hits, you're going to be maybe paying for another extension for LaMelo. You talk about Brandon Miller, whose contract is going to be up, and then you talk about Zion adding to that. If he's getting a max deal in the $40, $50, $60 million range, then what does that mean for the Hornets and their financial flexibility? You also take away Miles Bridges, who has shown that he can be good in the open court, that he can knock down the outside shot on occasion, and is as solid a rebounder as Zion Williamson. So are the Hornets really gaining a bunch by making that type of deal? For the Pelicans, sure, you get some talent in the short term. You get a guy who was a first-round pick a year ago. You get Miles Bridges, who, again, as we just talked about, excels in the open floor, undersized power forward, but you already had that in Zion Williamson. So you can play him at the 3 or the 4, depending on your lineup configurations. You can and he could work for you if you're the Pelicans. Getting 2 first-round picks certainly would be nice for the Pelicans. You can never have too many first-round picks, particularly when you are a small market team. You want the flexibility that comes with having as many first rounders as possible, not only to take those players and have cheap players on rookie contracts, but also to use those first round picks to acquire higher end talent. So that's a boon for the Pelicans. Also, if you're getting off of Zion's contract, though it isn't prohibitively bad for the Pelicans, it's really a team-friendly deal with all the outs for the Pelicans. You are giving yourself more immediate financial flexibility, especially when you consider that if you move Zion Williamson, you're still likely moving on from, let's say, a CJ McCollum and a Kelly Olynyk, so that you are getting those salaries off the books and maybe acquiring more young talent in return, if not draft picks and more financial flexibility for the long term. But for the Pelicans, you give away Zion Williamson, you are setting the franchise back in one regard. Your timetable has to change. You are not on an immediate track to try to build a contender. You're now trying to find out what this new team looks like and whether or not Bridges is a piece you want to keep long term, whether or not you want to build around those guys, and how do your other players deal with that lack of gravity on the offensive end in particular? How does that impact Trey Murphy? How does that impact Herb Jones? How does that impact the rest of the players on your roster? Are you now searching for better fits for the style of play that requires? Or can those guys step up and fill those needs as far as creating their own offense and becoming better players? There's going to be a significant portion of the fan base who isn't happy with that, giving up on a Zion Williamson, though there is a significant portion of the fan base that is ready to move past Zion Williamson. It is still always hard to watch a number one overall pick leave your franchise for a relatively, a player not on their level as far as accolades and overall talent. I mean, Miles Bridges is a fine player, but he's not Zion Williamson. And then neither one of those players will probably reach the ceiling that you had with Zion. So are you getting enough in return? And with the draft picks, you don't know what the quality of those drafts will be. You don't know if the Hornets are going to be good. And if they're good, do those picks have the same weight? So there's always that guessing game as well. But overall, I would tell you that I don't think that a Zion Williamson trade is forthcoming. I don't think it's anywhere close to happening. I don't think Joe Dumars is interested in moving on from Zion Williamson. But certainly, I would enjoy your feedback on this potential deal. A lot of times, as I see in the comments, folks are not impressed with the returns that the Pelicans could get for Zion Williamson. I don't think this would be enough for most fans to think that let's go ahead and make this deal. But again, give me your thoughts in the comments section. All right. One of the other players who's been attached to the Pelicans, and I think is also a long shot, but this has been talked about, is adding Bucks center and veteran of, I think he's 37 years old now, Brook Lopez joining the Pelicans. And how does he fit in with the potential team dynamics of that? Well, the upside is, with Brook Lopez, you're getting a couple of things. You're getting solid rim protection. He is still a very good shot blocker in this league. And he's coming off a season where he played the most minutes in the past several seasons. So he was still able to be a contributor to the Bucks on both ends of the floor. His ability to space the floor is well known. They call him Splash Mountain. He shot 37% from three. That's typically where he is, between 37 and 40%. That allows, again, if you are able to bring him in, that allows more room for Zion to operate, guys to get downhill, and he can knock down the mid-range jumper as well if he has to pick and pop. So he has that ability. He's also brings in another veteran to kind of teach guys like Yves Missi and Carlo Makovich what it means to be an NBA center, how they can improve, particularly on the defensive end. And he's a guy who understands floor spacing for Carlo Makovich. The one thing is that you're not getting out of Brook Lopez is extreme athleticism. He's never been a great athlete, and you have to deal with certain things with him on the back end. Putting him in the pick and roll is not always going to be the best thing possible. But the Pelicans have had that problem anyway. So certainly adding someone with his offensive skills could be a boost to the Pelicans. You do worry about that age, again, at 37. When it goes quickly. When players fall off that cliff, it happens very fast, and the returns are pretty bad. The financial implications of signing a guy like Brook Lopez, certainly he's going to ask for a good chunk of change, particularly if you're going to pay the losing tax, is what I would say for a team like the New Orleans Pelicans, who has not won anything significant in the history of the franchise, has never been past the second round of the playoffs. There's the losing tax, where you have to pay more than other teams in order to attract talent because they are willing to take less for a better chance at winning. And you would think that Brook Lopez at this stage in his career is still very appealing to teams who are trying to win. You'd be in a bidding war potentially with teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, with teams like, throughout the Eastern Conference who are trying to fix their center position. Does Philadelphia make a move and try, while Joel Embiid is out, to have a stopgap and put Lopez in that position in order to open the floor for Tyrese Maxey? There's certainly options available to him. Does he go to Miami and you pair him with Bam Adebayo, moving Bam away from the center spot, letting him play his more natural position of the power forward, and have Brook Lopez at center? They're just teams that are going to be able to present better options as far as a chance to win a title in the short term for a guy who's 37. And then the fit with the current roster. When you take in a veteran, he's used to doing things a certain way. And so do the Pelicans adjust to him, or is he able to adjust to the Pelicans at age 37? And are you hampering the development of your younger centers if you're bringing Lopez in? Does he play starters minutes? And if he's playing starters minutes, what does that mean for Yves Missi and Carlo Makovic? All those would be concerns if you bring in Brook Lopez. He absolutely has experience. He absolutely has skills that could benefit this team. But the question would be, are the gains in the short term good enough for what this would cost? And I think, again, the Pelicans are not in the position to make win now moves. You want to get better this offseason. You want to acquire better basketball players. But if you're taking on somebody like Brook Lopez, who wants to win a championship today, then I think that necessitates other moves around the fringes that the Pelicans may not be ready to make. And so I think that at this time, Brook Lopez doesn't fit. If you're having a great season and Brook Lopez is somewhere where he's not winning, then you can go ahead and try to use the assets to acquire somebody like them if that's your missing piece by that stage. But I think starting this season, you really want to empower some of these guys that you have returning. And I'm going to talk about one of the most important players in that when we transition. So let's go ahead and do that. And I want to talk about Trey Murphy III. Last season was supposed to be Trey's breakout. And in a lot of ways it was. Certainly he put up some great numbers for you, able to put up career highs in scoring, raise the scoring average by about 7 points per game over the previous year, just under 7 points per game. He's seen a steady uptick in his scoring since he came into the league. Trey's been a guy who flirts with the 50, 40, 90 club. He needs to raise his free throw percentage a little bit, has been at 90% once in his career, an 87% free throw shooter for his career, a career 38% 3-point shooter after 4 seasons, and 45% overall. And what we saw last year is, again, a second straight year for Trey that was cut short by injury. He's only played in 104 games over the last 2 seasons. So the injury concerns around Trey Murphy are there as well. His first season was kind of up and down, a mixed bag, as he really couldn't find a spot in the rotation, came on at the end and played a lot better. Year 2 started to feel like a breakout season. He played almost 80 games that year, started to show that potential of him being an elite shooter, an elite scorer, shot over 40% from three-point range that season, and started to really come into his own. And then you saw last year him, in pursuit of the single season 3-point record for the franchise, and shooting well over 200 3-pointers per season over the last couple of years, steady climbing up that all-time 3-point list. I think just behind CJ McCollum, could pass CJ depending on whether or not CJ completes the year in New Orleans this year. And then you look at the explosion, comparing just last season to the season before. In 2024, in 53 games, Trey scored 20 points or more 13 times. He scored 30 points or more twice, and he didn't score 40 points in any games in 2024. Last season, in 51 games, he scored at least 20 points 30 times. That's a jump of nearly double from the year before, more than double. He went from 25% of his games with 20 points to 58.8% of his games scoring at least 20 points. He went from 3% of his games, 3.8% of his games scoring 30 points, to 9.8% of his games scoring at least 30 points. And he had 2 40-point games as well. So you talk about Trey's ability to put up these big scoring nights. And obviously the removal of Brandon Ingram had a big part of to do with that. Certainly the injuries that the team faced allowed for him to take more shots, but it wasn't a huge jump up in field goal attempts for Tre. Per 100 possessions, he only added about 3 shot attempts per game. The big growth for Tre last season was in his ability to make twos. His 2-point percentage was the highest of his career. He got to the rim a lot more, created more free throw attempts for himself. And actually last year, his 3-point attempts per game were down by 1. And I think that's a direct result of the way teams defended him. They were much more eager to run him off that 3-point line. And there were nights it was harder for Tre to get into a rhythm, but he recognized when they were running him off the 3-point line and was able to get to the basket for either dunks, layups, shorter shots, or he was able to get to the free throw line, which he did at a high rate last season, considering that his free throw attempts jumped from 3.2 the previous year to 4.5 a season ago. So Tre is showing growth in all the areas of his game. I think one of the areas where people have kind of, looked at as an area where he really needs to improve is as a rebounder. But what you find is that it depends on the lineups that Tre is in. When he's primarily playing as a 3, his rebounding totals go down because he's further away from the basket the way the offense is set up. When he's played at the 4, opposite Zion Williamson, when Zion plays the 3 and Tre moves down to the 4, or Zion is playing the nominal point guard spot, Tre's rebounds tend to go up because he's often the weak side rebounder in those situations, and his numbers tend to reflect higher rebounding in those situations. So I think that his growth as a rebounder is something that we'll continue to see, especially as he gains weight. And we've seen steady progress with Tre in developing an NBA body since his rookie season. I mean, he looked like a teenager and when he came into the league, and now he looks like a grown man. And I think that that's been a huge difference in his growth as a player. And if that continues, then Tre can be a major part of this team's success going forward. But I think that those concerns regarding his injury history the last 2 seasons, you want to see him avoid missing 30 games over the course of a season due to injury. You want to see that end. And you also want to see Tre take more ownership now that he's the primary perimeter scorer for this team. His role next season, especially with DeJounte Murray out, demands that he stay aggressive every night. Demands that he take shots early and often. And I think that one of the big concerns that there was with Tre as well was last season there would be entire quarters where it felt like he didn't get a shot. That falls on both Trey Murphy and Willie Green. Willie Green talked about this and said that Tre has to be more aggressive. He has to seek out his own shots. But Willie Green has to help out his player by designing some plays, simple 1 or 2 plays per game that are Tre's plays, where if he hasn't gotten a shot in a few minutes, we just run that and you make sure that he gets a good opportunity to either take a shot or make a play. But when he's not engaged in the offense and the defense doesn't have to deal with him, you're taking one of the rare shooting threats that the Pelicans have out of the game. And that can't happen when he's on the floor. He has to be an offensive threat every possession. The ball has to find him. He's got to get his touches. The same with Zion Williamson. Both of them have to get consistent touches, and that happens for long stretches, and it has happened for the Pelicans in multiple seasons where the best offensive players can go possession after possession without getting their hands on the basketball. And that just can't happen for a good team trying to get better. The Pelicans have to do a better job of finding Trey Murphy and creating scoring opportunities for him. The thing you're noticing, too, is Treys Profile continues to rise around the NBA. He did an interview with Taylor Rooks. He's done podcasts. He's been an NBA representative at the All-Star game and all these things where he's doing interviews and conducting podcasts and stuff like that. And Tre is showing those star qualities. He's always had that about him. He's got a sense of humor. He has the look. He plays the right kind of game where he's an analytics dream in his ability to finish around the rim and his ability to shoot it from long distance. So Tre has all the qualities that you're looking for in a star player, but he has to win over the doubters by being consistent every night. He has to win over the doubters by proving that not only is he a good second option, but he can be a first option when the time calls. So we'll see if mentally he's ready to make that step, because if there's one thing we've seen with Tre is that his physical commitment to the position has been there. His game has expanded year by year. He's gotten better as a player the more minutes he's gotten. And that's what you want to see, not just shot attempts going up and scoring going up. That can be any player if they're given the opportunity. But what you're seeing, Trey, is how does he improve his game? Improving your free throw attempts, improving your ability to finish around the rim, improving the versatility of your game. One thing he also needs to add is that pull-up jump shot. Take one hard dribble inside the three-point line when you've been driven off the line, be able to drive hard towards the basket, pull up and knock down that mid-range jump shot, or get into a floater where you can drop that over the defense when you get inside. Trey has to just continue to add to his repertoire, but there's nothing standing in his way for him to become an elite second option in the NBA. And that's exactly what you need for Zion Williamson, is somebody who pairs with him. And the numbers have always been great for Trey and Zion on the floor together. Zion's best numbers have typically come with either Herb Jones or Trey Murphy on the floor with him. So if you're getting the best of Trey Murphy and the best of Zion Williamson, along with key contributions from the rest of the role players, if they're able to fulfill their roles, particularly that starting lineup, then I think you can see some real growth for the New Orleans Pelicans. If not, if Trey is just good again, if he's just a good player again, that's not going to be enough to keep the Pelicans in pace with the rest of the Western Conference while DeJounte Murray gets better, while you figure out what this team is really going to be for the duration of the Joe Dumars tenure. One more Trey to look at before we get out of here today, and that's Tre Johnson. So we're going to look at the freshman from Texas and a projected top 10 pick in this draft. The Pelicans, of course, hold the number 7 pick in the draft, and he is one of the names that regularly surfaces as a potential target. So you can find out about Trey and what he brings to the Pelicans as well. He's a guy who gives the Pelicans one thing more than anything else, and that's his ability to score. He's not the tallest player. He's just under 6'5" without shoes, but you play with shoes, so he's close to 6'5", 6'6". Doesn't weigh a lot at between 185 and 190, but a long wingspan, 6'10", and he's young, only 19 years old. Last season with Texas, he averaged 19.9 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, and shot about 40% from 3, 87% from the free throw line. He's a shooter, plain and simple. He's a shooter. He knocks down shots. He has good shooting, repeatable shooting mechanics that are going to look good in the NBA no matter what. This is a kid who led the SEC, one of the toughest conferences in college basketball, in scoring as a freshman. And he can do it all as an offensive player. He can create his own shot. He's good in catch and shoot situations. He averaged 1.2 points per possession on catch and shoot jumpers. So he is an efficient scorer as well. Very good footwork, great balance as a scorer, doesn't get knocked off his spot very easily, and has shooting range that goes well beyond the NBA three-point line. So you can see him filling that role for you. He's known as a player with a high basketball IQ who's willing to do the work. And he's been compared to, at times, Devin Booker and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He says those are also the players he wants to emulate. So certainly those are two of the better scorers in the NBA. Shai leading the league in scoring. Devin Booker, a guy who's going to give you 25 a night with regularity, who can mix it up from all 3 levels. If you're getting that in Tre Johnson, you have to be excited. The areas where you are a little bit more concerned, not a great playmaker. But again, he wasn't asked to do that, and I don't think he should be asked to do that a ton at the NBA level. This is a guy who you asked to score the basketball. How many playmakers do you really need on the floor who need the basketball? I think more than anything, you want him to be able to move without the basketball and to be able to put it on the floor quickly in situations where it calls for it and make the play off of that. If your scoring is cut off, then you make the play. But his primary focus, especially early on in his career, should simply be about getting buckets. That's his job. That's his number one skill set. And you make it easy on him by taking those playmaking duties. You do not make him into a combo guard. This is a scoring guard, and you let him score the basketball. The playmaking will come as he gets more mature as a basketball player. But I think right now the focus has to be on him as a scorer. Defensively, not great, but who coming out of college is great defensively by and large? Unless you're getting a 4-year player like Herb Jones, who's dedicated his life to playing great defense, when you get a kid coming out of college, he's played a lot of junk defense from high school, from AAU, and in the college game. You played a lot of junk defenses, and you have not been great at on-ball defense. He's going to have to learn that. If you put him in the right backcourt, he can be okay. If you put him in a backcourt where you put another sieve next to him at the point guard position, it's going to be hard for the Pelicans or whomever drafts him to get stops at the point of attack. And he needs to get bigger. But that's also, at 19 years old, you expect that he will get bigger and stronger. So you think about what he brings to the table. He seems to be skill-wise the perfect matchup for the Pelicans. His offensive versatility, that's something that you're not getting out of Jordan Hawkins. That's not something that you may necessarily get out of Antonio Reeves as a second rounder. With Tre Johnson, you know you're getting offensive versatility, and you're getting a proven shooter, far more than you saw out of Jordan Hawkins, much more in line than with what you saw in Antonio Reeves, who shot well over 40% from three his final season in college. At 19, again, you're putting somebody on that scale to start building up their career. The only concern, I guess, is if it matches the timetable that you're reestablishing for Zion Williamson. But I think he fits whatever timetable. If you can score the basketball, we'll figure it out. And the Pelicans need more scoring, particularly on the perimeter. So I think that you have to take care of him defensively. You have to make sure that he's set up in situations to be okay, and that you're not putting him in bad situations. And then the ball's got to move. And these are the challenges, I think, that when you look at any rookie, I think there's a hesitancy on the part of fans to look at what this offense has done. And though it is said it's a 0.5 mentality, though it says it wants player movement and ball movement, though they've been told time and time again that the ball has energy when it moves, the Pelicans have been far too stagnant with the basketball. And with a guy like Tre Johnson, that basketball needs to move to take advantage of his skill set so that he can take advantage of defensive rotations, so that he can get kickouts from the post, so that he can get kickouts off of drives, so that he can put the ball on the court and attack the basket. All of those things have to happen because the ball is moving quickly from one side of the court to the other. And far too often with the Pelicans, that hasn't been the case. So I would say this: Tre Johnson is absolutely a candidate for that 7th pick. If certainly that would require some of the teams in front to pass, because this is a young man who's climbing quickly up draft boards. Do the Pelicans have to move up to get him? That's a possibility too. But if you're really high on Tre Johnson, yeah, you should go get him. If he feels like the missing piece offensively, the Pelicans need to go get Tre Johnson. If not, if you're content with sitting at 7, you may have to look in another direction for your draft pick. You may be falling back towards the Con Knipples or the Cayman Malawaks, if that's what your choice is. And that's fine. Those are fine choices. But I'm saying it looks more and more like if the Pelicans want to get Tre Johnson, they're going to have to shoot up to maybe as high as 4 in order to secure him. And that may, depending on what the cost is that prohibitive or not? We shall see. All right, that's going to do it for today. I'll be back on Thursday. In the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, leave your comments below, make sure you subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. So until the next time, I am David Grubb. This has been the Post Up on Boot Crew Media. Y'all have a great one.